Hello, dear friends. It's a few weeks later, but I'd like to mention an idea from parshat Va-Yakhel, and I call it a heart of understanding, which is descriptions from Betzalel, and Uriel, Betzalel ben Uri ben Hur Matel Yehuda. So he is of course, the architecture of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, of the sanctuary in the desert. And I want to discuss a little bit about how he's described. So in chapter 36 in the book of Shemot in Exodus, it says, and Moses said to the people of Israel, Re'u ki kara Hashem b'shem Betzalel. God has called in the name of Betzalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, Lemate Yehuda, from the tribe of Judah. And he's been filled with the Spirit of God. By the way, the translation of Unklus in Aramaic is Nivuah, prophecy of God. He's been spirit, but here it calls the Spirit of God, b'chokhmah, in wisdom, b'tvuna, understanding, u'b'da'at, and knowledge, u'v'chol malacha, and all the different types of artisan works, all different types of artistic types, masonry, and different types of work. L'chshov machshavot, and to think the thoughts which are needed in order to make works of zahav, of gold, of kesef, of silver, of nechoshet, of copper, uva charoshet even, and masonry working with stone, lamalot, to fill it up, uva charoshet eitz, and working with wood, lasot b'chol melechet machshevet, to do all the different types of artistic works. Ula horot natan b'libo, and he was also given the ability to teach in his heart. He and Oholiav, his assistant, the son of Achisamach from the tribe of Dan. Mileotam, they were filled with chokhmat lev, with the wisdom of the heart. Now, what does it mean, the wisdom of the heart? In a Western point of view, we think of wisdom in the brain, wisdom in the head. And we have a concept which is logos, which of course is speech, which represents logic and understanding. We also have nous, which is a Greek word for the mind. But all this we talk about is in the head. And the Bible is talking here about thoughts of the heart. What does it mean, thoughts of the heart? First of all, within the context of what it's saying here, it would seem that thoughts of the heart are thoughts that are artistic thoughts, that need, if you want, a certain influence of emotion. An artist is somebody who has a certain sensitivity, whether it's plastic arts or all different types of arts you have. But if we're talking about here, even if it's masonry, or if it's painting, or if it's weaving, or making objects, etc., it's a certain sensitivity, which would be, in this sense, possibly a chokhmat lev. But in general, in the Torah, very often it's not unusual to find wisdom connected to the heart. We also find other types. There are cultures like in the Far East where they connect, especially among the Chinese, where they connect the liver to the idea of thought. In our tradition too, in the Talmud, first of all, we say that God knows klayot v'lev. God knows a man's kidneys and his heart. So it's interesting. The heart, we understand, means the thoughts of the heart, but what does it mean to know his kidneys? Well, this we have also in Talmudic sources, not just in biblical sources. V'chein klayot v'lev, right? That God judges both what's in the heart and in the kidneys, but we have also in Talmudic sources. Talmud says, klayot yoatzot, which literally means that the kidneys give advice. And kaved, and the liver, gets angry, ka'es. Now, we can understand this as a metaphor, because you could say, what does it mean that the kidneys give advice? If you remember, the kidneys are the ones that purify the blood, So they get rid of what's not necessary. And good advice is getting rid of things that you don't need. That's a good advice. Keeping away from people who are bad influences, just like the kidneys, or purify the blood. What does it mean that kaved koes, that the liver gets angry? Well, if you have too much junk food, if you have too much alcohol, sugar, right away it creates inflammation in the liver. So it's almost like the liver gets angry a lot, gets inflamed every time you eat something which is bad for it. Kaved koes. So this could also be a metaphor. But with the heart, it seems to be much more pronounced. We have a lot of this idea of the understanding of the heart. As I said, in this context, it seems to be there are actually a few words that are used here. First are the words which are most common, which is chokhmah, wisdom, tivuna, understanding and knowledge. This is also found in Kabbalistic literature, and it's understood epistemologically. When a person thinks, you have the beginning of thought, which is called wisdom, which is the idea that appears in the mind. Tivuna, or understanding, or bina, is analytical thought, where you analyze the idea to see if it's correct. And dat, knowledge, is when that idea becomes part of you and becomes internalized in your thinking process. The Hebrew word tivuna, or bina, comes from the Hebrew word bain, between. As it says in the book of Job, Umi natan la sechvi bina, and who gave the sechvi understanding? Now, one interpretation of the sechvi is the rooster, because the rooster knows when to crow. When the sun comes out, starts to crow. So how does he have understanding? Others explain that the sechvi is the heart, gave the heart understanding. So again, you have this idea that the heart has understanding. Now, if we look in Unglus actually explains this verse that way, but verse 32, that aside from wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, Betzalel was given the ability to think thoughts. And this is translated by Unglus as to teach, to think thoughts, because there's a difference between the way I understand it and the ability to transfer this knowledge to somebody else. I actually need a deeper understanding in order to transfer it. Because I might have understood enough for myself, but to teach it to somebody else, I need to know even better. And that's called lachshav machshavot, to think thoughts. It's sort of a deeper understanding in order to transfer it to somebody else. And in verse 34, it actually says in Hebrew, lahorot, which means to teach. And again, it is translated by Unglus, 34, alafa, which means, again, to teach. And the teaching was given in his heart. The heart represents a deeper understanding, a certain sensitivity. Now, what does this mean? I would say that, aside from the fact, by the way, biologically, that supposedly there are some brain cells found in the heart. This I found out on the last year, something to look up. But it seems that we all feel that the heart is sort of the seat of the sensitivity of the emotions. We feel this maybe because of the adrenaline, which speeds up our heart rate when we are either angry or in fear or in love. But this is probably best explained by the analogy of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle itself. The Malbim, an interpreter of the Torah from the end of the 19th century, says that the three parts to the tabernacle, to the Mishkan, to the sanctuary, you have the Holy of Holies, the inner part, where you have the Ark of the Covenant and the tablets. Says this represents the head. And in the head, you have the brain, like the tablets, and there are two tablets, because there's the right hemisphere and the left hemisphere to the brain. By the way, in Kabbalistic literature, this represents chokhmah, wisdom, and bina, understanding. And the small brain represents dad, which is knowledge, the cerebellum, which controls action and output. And then there's a separation, it's called the neck. That's the first separation between the Holy Holies and the oracle, or the middle part of the sanctuary. And it's separated by curtains. just like the head is separated from the rest of the body by the neck. And past that curtain, you have the heichal, the middle section of the temple. In that middle section of the temple, you have the candelabra, the menorah, which is light. That represents the light of the heart, the wisdom of the heart. That's the way it's usually explained. And then there's the showbread table, representing the stomach. And then there is the mizbach haktoret, which is the incense altar, which gives a fragrance, a smell, that represents the lungs, where we breathe. That's the middle part. And then again, there's a curtain separating the middle part from the outer chamber. And that curtain represents the diaphragm, which is another separation. And under the diaphragm represents the third part of the sanctuary, which is called the azara, where everybody could walk into. And there you had, of course, the altar of the offering of animals, because the more animal side of the human being is in the lower section, according to this interpretation. But the interesting thing is that the middle section, the heart, becomes the light of wisdom of the candelabra, of the menorah. Again, this idea, this association with the heart, which is called lev mivin, a heart of understanding. And even Solomon asked for a heart of understanding from God. So what is a heart of understanding? Now, let me give you one more picture. And this picture comes from the writings of Isaac Luria, the famous Kabbalist from the 16th century of Tzafat. And when he discusses the candelabra, which I said represents the light of understanding, he says the candelabra works like this. It has 7 branches, including the middle section. 6 in the middle section. Sometimes we say it represents the 7 days of the week, the middle one being the Sabbath, which gives from its holiness all the days of the week. But he explains it differently. So the Lurianic explanation is that the head represents the branches of the candelabra. So the mouth, because there's 7 holes in the head, mouth, 2 nostrils, 2 eyes, 2 ears is 7. So the mouth is the middle branch of the candelabra. The 2 nostrils are the next 2, the eyes are the next 2, and the ears are the next 2, altogether 7. But the bottom of the candelabra, the base where it's sitting, is in the heart. So it sits in the heart, but it manifests itself through the head. What does that mean? This connection between the heart and the head. I'll tell you what I think. In the context of this parshat Va-Yakhel, where it's talking about the sanctuary, the tabernacle, I think it's obvious. It's this sensitivity, it's knowledge, what we would call a practical knowledge with an artistic sensitivity, and therefore it's knowledge of the heart. But even when we talk about the difference between theoretical knowledge and practical knowledge, ethics is practical knowledge, according to Aristotle. And it's about a certain sensitivity, how to live with human beings. To be a moral person is to realize that there are other people out there. As my friend Rabbi Sharkey once said, Rabbi Sharkey, that the Hebrew word for compassion is rachamim. And the word rachamim in Hebrew is also the same word rechem, which means the womb. Because compassion, the ability to have compassion, is the ability to include another human being within your world, just like the woman is able to include another human being with her in her womb. That's what compassion is. That's not something that everybody has, but hopefully everybody should strive for, have that ability. And so to be a moral person is to have sensitivity. It's not just wisdom of the mind, it's wisdom of the heart. The Talmud defines a scholar by the appellation chaver, which means a friend. Interesting, a friend, meaning you know other people. But the Talmud also says, what is the definition of a chaver? What is the definition of a scholar? The definition of a scholar is somebody who will never begrudge the poor of what they deserve. They give the tithes, like the Torah prescribes it, to the tribe of Levi, and they give the truma, the donation they're supposed to give to the Kohen, who's also from the tribe of Levi, because Levi doesn't have land. And they give also the tithe to the poor when it's necessary. So a scholar is defined by the ability also to have moral sensitivity. It's not just theoretical intellect. Somebody who is able to turn their intellectual understanding into something which is moral behavior. So that brings us back to chokhmat lev, the knowledge of the heart. Just like there's a sensitivity in making and being an artisan and making artistic artifacts, there has to be a sensitivity in our relationship to others. And this is the chokhmat lev, the wisdom of the heart, where we try to use sympathy and empathy and understanding in order to understand our place in this world and our place among others. Shalom, shalom.